On egg selection day, my brother chose the golden dragon egg, and the elders called him blessed. I got the cracked gray one nobody wanted, the one covered in dust at the back of the vault, the one apprentices used as a doorstop. When it hatched 3 days later in front of the entire Crimson Fawn clan, a mosquito the size of my thumbnail crawled out. The elders laughed so hard one of them choked on his tea. My brother's dragon roared, shaking the ceremonial hall. My mosquito buzzed once and landed on my shoulder. That night, when a feral wolf attacked our training grounds, my mosquito bit it once. Just once. I watched the wolf collapse, as every ounce of its strength permanently became mine. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to that morning. The morning everything changed. Dawn broke cold over the Crimson Fawn clan's ancestral vault, painting the stone walls in shades of rust and amber. 17 years I had lived in these halls, and never once had I stood at the front of any gathering. Today was no different. I positioned myself at the back of the assembled youth, shoulder pressed against a pillar worn smooth by generations of nervous hands. 12 eggs glowed on the sacred pedestal, 12 futures waiting to be claimed. My father's voice rolled through the chamber like distant thunder. Patriarch Baek Chun-ho stood at the dais in ceremonial robes the color of dried blood, his beard oiled, his back straight despite his 53 years. He spoke of honor, of legacy, of the Crimson Fawn's glorious past and the generation that would restore it. His eyes found my brother in the crowd and stayed there. Baek Yojin, he called, firstborn of the main family. Step forward. Yojin moved through the parting crowd like a blade through silk. 19 years old, broad-shouldered, golden-eyed, he walked the way people walk when they have never once doubted their place in the world. The other youths watched him with envy and admiration in equal measure. I watched him with nothing at all. I had learned to feel nothing about my brother years ago. It was easier that way. He approached the pedestal where the 12 eggs pulsed with inner light. Some glowed white-hot. Others shimmered with frost or crackled with barely contained lightning. One, the largest, resting at the center, burned gold. Yojin didn't hesitate. He reached for the golden egg, and the moment his fingers touched its shell, cracks spiderwebbed across its surface. The hall held its breath. The egg shattered. Light erupted, and from the fragments rose a creature that made grown warriors drop to their knees. Wariong, a juvenile ember dragon, no larger than a hunting hound, but radiating heat that reached every corner of the vault. Its scales gleamed like molten copper. Its eyes burned with ancient fire. When it opened its mouth and roared, the sound shook dust from rafters that hadn't trembled in decades. The crowd erupted. Elders wept. Warriors cheered. My father, my proud, distant, impossible-to-please father, had tears streaming down his weathered face. An ember dragon, he breathed. After 3 generations of decline, an ember dragon has chosen us again. Yojin stood bathed in his dragon's glow, and his triumphant smile could have lit the room on its own. He looked every inch the hero the Crimson Fawn had been praying for. I pulled my notebook from my sleeve and wrote, Brother's Beast, a rank minimum. Possibly higher. Fire affinity confirmed. Will likely inherit patriarchy within 5 years. The ceremony continued. Other youths approached the pedestal. Better eggs were claimed. A storm falcon for the general's daughter. A stone bear for the quartermaster's son. Each hatching brought cheers, congratulations, future secured. The crowd thinned. The eggs dwindled. By the time my name was called, only 3 remained on the pedestal. A dull brown thing that leaked a smell like rotting vegetation. A pulsing gray mass that looked more tumor than egg. And in the corner, half hidden behind the others, something so small and damaged I almost missed it entirely. A cracked gray egg, cold to the eye, covered in a film of dust that suggested it hadn't been touched in years. I walked forward through the silence. No cheers for the second son. No whispered speculation about my potential. Just silence. The kind that says everything it needs to say. My hand hovered over the 3 remaining options. The brown egg squelched. The gray mass pulsed wetly. Neither called to me, but that cracked thing in the corner. Something pulled at my chest. Not excitement, not hope, something deeper. something that felt almost like recognition. I picked it up. The shell was ice-cold against my palms, its surface marred by fractures so deep I could see darkness within. A system notification flickered to life in my vision, the same blue window that appeared for every tamer when they touched their destined beast. But mine read wrong. Grade, F-, species, unknown, status, dormant, requires external catalyst. I stared at those words. F-, a grade so low it shouldn't exist. A species so worthless the system couldn't even identify it. Somewhere behind me, someone laughed. The sound spread. Soon half the hall was chuckling, and my father's face had shifted from indifference to something worse. Embarrassment. Yojin's laugh cut through the rest. Not cruel. Worse than cruel. Dismissive. The laugh of someone who had already forgotten I existed. At least the vault's doorstop finally found a purpose, he said. A few elders choked on their own mirth. I carry my cracked egg home through a gauntlet of pitying stares. My ink-stained fingers traced its fractures as I walked, feeling the web of damage that covered its entire surface. Analytically, I cataloged every flaw, every chip, every crack that should have made this egg worthless. But beneath the cold, something warm, faint, growing. That night, I sat alone in my sparse room, the small one at the end of the servants' corridor, far from the main family quarters. Moonlight slanted through my single window. The cracked egg rested in my palms, its gray shell silver in the darkness. I felt it crack further. A sound emerged from within, soft, rhythmic, a heartbeat, beating in perfect synchronization with my own. The egg was gone. I knew this before I opened my eyes. The weight that had pressed against my chest through the night, that fragile, cracked thing I had cradled like a dying ember, had vanished. In its place, I felt only scattered fragments, sharp edges pressing into my blanket, pieces of shell that crumbled to dust beneath my fingertips. As I pushed myself upright in the gray light of pre-dawn, my breath caught. There in the center of the debris sat something so small I almost missed it entirely. A mosquito, barely larger than the nail of my smallest finger. Its body was a dull crimson, the color of dried blood on old bandages, and its wings caught the faint light from my window like fragments of clouded glass. It sat perfectly still on a shard of eggshell, its needle-thin proboscis tucked beneath what passed for its head. My system interface flickered to life unbidden, text burning across my vision in pale blue characters. Bond established, beast, blood mosquito, F rank. Name, pending. I stared at those words for a long moment. Then at the creature. Then back at the words. F rank. The lowest possible grade. The rank given to beasts so weak that most tamers release them back into the wild rather than suffer the embarrassment of acknowledgement. Rats achieved F rank. Slugs. Common insects that died within weeks of hatching. A mosquito. The sound that escaped my throat surprised me. It started as something that might have been a sob, transformed halfway through into a cough, and emerged finally as laughter. Hollow, broken, the kind of laugh that scrapes your chest raw on the way out. Of course this was what hatched. What else could the cracked egg of the invisible second sun possibly contain? The morning meal was a formal affair in the Crimson Fong clan's main hall. Carved wooden pillars depicted our ancestral beasts, proud tigers, noble wolves, the occasional serpent from more prosperous eras. Breakfast was taken at a single long table, family members arranged by status. My father at the head, my mother at his right hand, Yojin beside her, his ember dragon coiled possessively around his shoulders, scales catching the lamplight like living flame. I sat at the far end, alone. Yeoman. My mother's voice carried the length of the table with practiced precision. Lady Beckinseo was a beautiful woman, even now, dark hair threaded with silver, features sharp enough to cut. Her smile, as I approached the head of the table, was thin as paper. Show us what has hatched. I extended my hand. Jeanne sat in the center of my palm, utterly motionless, a smudge of dull red against my ink-stained skin. The silence that followed was worse than mockery. Yojin's dragon raised its head, golden eyes narrowing. A sound emerged from its throat, not quite a hiss, not quite a growl. Something between amusement and contempt. The tiny mosquito in my palm shuddered once, then vanished into the shadow of my sleeve with a speed I hadn't expected. A mosquito. My brother's voice was flat. Not cruel exactly, simply dismissive. The tone one might use to comment on weather that was neither good nor bad. How fitting. My mother's thin smile wavered. She glanced at my father. Lord Baek-yunho had not spoken a full sentence to me in days. He was a large man, broad-shouldered and thick-armed, with the bearing of someone who had never questioned his place in the world. His own bonded beast, an aging, but still formidable ironback bear, slumbered in the courtyard outside. When he finally spoke, his words fell like stones dropped into still water. You may still serve the clan in administrative duties. That was all. No comfort, no engagement, no suggestion that perhaps the bond might develop, that F-rank beasts occasionally surprise their tamers, that my 17 years of diligent study might somehow compensate for this cosmic joke. Just dismissal, complete, final, a door closing on a future I had never truly believed in any way. I bowed. I returned to my seat. I ate my rice without tasting it, and inside my sleeve, I felt Jean's hunger pulsing through our bond like a second heartbeat. The Eastern Library had been my sanctuary since I was old enough to read. 3 generations ago, when the Crimson Fawn clan still mattered, this hall had housed thousands of texts, cultivation manuals, beast compendiums, strategic treatises from wars long forgotten. Now dust-coated empty shelves, and the scrolls that remained were so old their edges crumbled at a careless touch. No one came here anymore. No one except me. I settled into my usual corner, worn notebook open on my knees, and coaxed Jean from my sleeve onto the page. The mosquito landed on a blank section, its translucent wings folding against its crimson body with mechanical precision. Jean, I said quietly. The word felt right in my mouth. Needle. Sharp. Small. Easily overlooked until it pierced your skin. Through our bond, I felt the creature's acknowledgement. Not words, but a pulse of recognition. It knew its name now, understood that we were linked. I began to write. Blood mosquito, F rank. Size, approximately 8 millimeters. Coloration, dull crimson body, translucent wings. Behavior, responsive to emotional state through bond. Demonstrates unusual stillness, possibly an adaptation for ambush feeding. I paused, stylus hovering above the page. Hunger. The dominant sensation through our bond is hunger. Not physical. Jean has not requested food in the traditional sense. This hunger feels deeper, emptier, as if the creature was born incomplete and knows it. An emptiness that echoed my own. The granary sat at the edge of the clan compound, a squat wooden structure that smelled of millet and age. By the time a nervous servant found me that evening, wringing his hands about rats in the grain stores, I had already made my decision. I will handle it. The servant blinked at me, then at the mosquito barely visible against the dark fabric of my collar. His expression shifted through several phases: confusion, pity, and finally a kind of resigned acceptance. What harm could the second son and his worthless insect possibly do? As you wish, young master. The granary's interior was dark. Dust motes hung suspended in the thin light that leaked through gaps in the roof. I could hear them before I saw them. The scratch of claws on wood, the rustle of small bodies moving through grain. Jean lifted from my shoulder. I felt its hunger sharpen through our bond. Not asking permission, simply acknowledging what it was about to do. The mosquito descended toward the nearest sound. I lost sight of it almost immediately in the shadows. For a long moment, there was nothing, just darkness, just the sound of my own breathing and the skitter of rats. Then my system interface erupted. Essence drain activated, blue text seared across my vision line, after line appearing faster than I could read. Stat transfer in progress. Target, rat F rank, stealing, agility +1, stealing, vitality +1, transfer complete. Bonded tamer receives, agility +0.5, Vitality plus 0.5. A rat squealed somewhere in the darkness. The sound cut off abruptly, and through the bond, through every fiber of my being, I felt something change. Energy flooded my limbs. Subtle, but undeniable. My muscles twitched with unfamiliar responsiveness. My heartbeat steadied into a rhythm that felt somehow more efficient than before. I raised my hand, flexing my fingers, watching tendons move beneath skin that suddenly felt more alive than it had moments ago. Jeanne returned to my palm. A smear of blood glistened on its proboscis. I pulled up my interface again, then again, checking the numbers obsessively, certain I was misreading, certain this was some kind of error or hallucination brought on by exhaustion and disappointment. The numbers didn't change. Permanent theft. The rat stats, gone forever, transferred to Jeanne and to me. Share gains. Half of everything Jeanne stole flowed directly into my body through our bond. Infinite scaling potential. My mind raced through calculations. A single rat yielded 2 stats. Split between us, that was 1 full point for me. Worthless in isolation. But there were dozens of rats in this granary alone. Hundreds in the compound. Thousands in the wilderness beyond clan borders. And rats were the weakest possible prey. What about stronger creatures? What about the monsters that roamed the Ashen Wilds? C-rank beasts, B-rank predators, the legendary creatures that appeared in whispered stories. What about dragons? I sat among the grain sacks, Jeanne resting in my palm, and for the first time in my life, I allowed myself to want something that wasn't just survival. The question burned in my chest like a coal that refused to die. How strong can we become? The 4th bell rang through darkness, its bronze voice swallowed by sleeping corridors. Yeoman's eyes opened before the sound faded. He had trained himself to wake at this hour over the past 2 days, lying in bed and counting his own heartbeats until his body learned the rhythm. Now consciousness came like a blade drawn from its sheath, instant, silent, ready. He dressed without lighting a candle. His fingers knew where each item lay. The worn training clothes he had deliberately muddied to look worthless, the soft-soled shoes that made no sound on wooden floors, the leather notebook he kept strapped beneath his shirt. In the darkness, Jeanne stirred against his collarbone, tiny legs shifting, as awareness passed through their bond. Hunting? The concept arrived without words. Yeoman had discovered this over the past days. Jeanne communicated in impressions, in urges, in shared understanding that bypassed language entirely. Hunting. He slipped through his window rather than risk the hallway. The compound map existed perfectly in his memory now. Every patrol route and blind spot cataloged through nights of careful observation. The western courtyard lay abandoned because 3 years ago a storage fire had damaged the surrounding buildings. No one had bothered rebuilding structures that stored nothing of value. No one except the feral cats that had claimed the rubble. As territory, Yeoman moved through shadow like water through cracks. The pre-dawn air bit cold against his skin, carrying the smell of dew and distant cook fires where servants were already preparing the day's first meals. He reached the courtyard. As the sky began its slow fade from black to gray, the cats were there, 11 of them by his count, a colony that had established itself in the burned-out shells of former storerooms. They were not pets. They were hunters, lean and suspicious, survivors who had learned that humans meant danger. But they had not learned to fear mosquitoes. Yeoman settled into a crouch behind a collapsed beam. Patience. The cats would move soon, spreading out to hunt the rats that infested the compound's edges. Separated, they became vulnerable. He had learned this lesson the first morning when trying to approach the group had sent them scattering in 11 directions. Jeanne lifted from his collar, wings catching the faint gray light. Through their bond, Yeoman felt his partner's hunger, not for blood, but for essence, for growth. The mosquito drifted toward a tabby that had wandered near a gap in the rubble, its attention fixed on some rodent trail. The bite was surgical. Jeanne landed on the cat's haunch where fur grew thin, proboscis piercing skin before the animal could react. The tabby yowled, twisting, but Jeanne had already detached and vanished into shadow. +2 agility. The notification burned in Yeoman's mind. He felt the change instantly, a loosening in his joints, a subtle improvement in his awareness of his own body's position. The cat fled. The others scattered. But they would return. They always returned. By the time true dawn broke, Jean had drained 4 cats. Yeoman sat in the rubble, recording the results in his notebook with hands that trembled slightly from excitement. Session 3, Western Courtyard Targets. Feral Cats, F rank, total drain. Agility +5, Vitality +3, Strength +2 cumulative gains. 3 days Agility +14, Vitality +8, Strength +7, Perception +3. The numbers told a story that made his heart race. His baseline stats had started near human average, perhaps 10 points in each attribute, give or take. 3 days of hunting had increased his total by over 30 points. A normal tamer might gain that much in a year of conventional training. He was improving at roughly 100 times the standard rate. The implications spiraled outward in his mind like ripples from a stone. At this pace, he would surpass average tamers within weeks. Within months, he could rival those bonded with B-rank beasts. Within a year, he forced himself to stop calculating. Numbers were seductive, but they were also traps. Exponential growth required exponential risk. Rats and cats would not sustain this pace forever. Their low stats meant diminishing returns. As he grew stronger, eventually, he would need larger prey. Eventually, he would need to hunt things that could kill him. The pattern established itself with military precision. Mornings belonged to the Western Courtyard. Yeoman rose at the 4th bell, hunted until dawn, then returned to his room before the household stirred. His alibi was simple. He slept late, exhausted by the shame of his worthless bond. No one questioned it. No one cared enough to question it. Afternoons, he feigned illness. My stomach, he told the combat instructor, a thick-necked man named Do-sung who trained the clan's junior tamers. I think the selection ceremony unsettled something. Do-sung barely glanced at him. Yeoman's Mosquito had already marked him as irrelevant. Why waste effort on someone who would never fight? Rest. Then, we'll manage without you. We always managed. Without you hung unspoken in the air. Yeoman did not rest. He went to the clan library, a dusty hall that saw few visitors, and buried himself in monster bestiaries. The books were old, their pages yellowed and their bindings cracked. But the information they contained was priceless. The lesser mud serpent prefers shallow water with heavy vegetation. It hunts primarily through ambush, striking at prey that enters its territory. Weak points, the softer scales beneath the jaw, the vent area near the tail. Speed is moderate, but striking distance can exceed body length. The marsh toad secretes a paralytic toxin through its skin. Contact causes numbness within seconds, full paralysis within minutes. However, the toad must consciously activate this defense. Surprise attacks often succeed before the creature can respond. The phantom leech is nearly invisible in murky water. It detects prey through vibration and body heat. Despite its small size, its drain ability can weaken even C-rank creatures over time. Yeoman filled page after page with notes. Weak points, behavioral patterns, territorial ranges. The knowledge accumulated like coins in a miser's vault, each fact a weapon he might one day need. Evenings brought the marshlands. The border territory at the clan's eastern edge was technically off-limits to junior members, but the patrols focused on external threats, monster incursions, azure-scale scouts, the occasional desperate poacher. No one watched for a 17-year-old slipping out through the drainage grates. The marsh was alive with prey. Insects by the thousand. Frogs that sang in discordant chorus. Small serpents that slithered through the reeds. Each creature yielded only a point or two, but volume compensated for quality. Yeoman moved through the wetland like a farmer harvesting grain, methodical and patient, while Jean darted from target to target in an endless dance of acquisition. On the third evening, something changed. Jean was feeding on a marsh frog when Yeoman felt it, a pulse through their bond, faint, but distinct. Direction, distance, intensity. He turned toward the sensation without conscious thought, his eyes finding a patch of water perhaps 30 meters away. Something was there. Something with stats. Blood sense. The ability had manifested without warning, without ceremony. Jin simply possessed it now. As naturally as it possessed wings. Yeoman stared at the dark water, processing the implications. They could detect prey. They could gauge relative power before engaging. The hunt had just become immeasurably more efficient and immeasurably more tempting. On the fourth day, his mother summoned him. Lady Beck, Jinha, received him in her private study, a small room that smelled of ink and dried flowers. She was a thin woman with gray-streaked hair and the permanent frown of someone who had learned early that life delivered disappointments more reliably than joys. Her own bonded beast, a small healing songbird, sat silent on its perch, watching Yeoman with black eyes. "Your father has arranged a position," she said without preamble. "The accounting hall needs clerks. You'll begin next month." Yeoman kept his face appropriately humble. "I'm grateful for the opportunity. It's not an opportunity." Her voice carried no cruelty, only exhaustion. "It's management. You need somewhere to exist that won't embarrass the family, and the accounting hall doesn't require a combat-capable beast. A place to exist." The phrase lodged in his chest like a splinter. "I understand, Mother. Do you?" She studied him with something that might have been curiosity or might have been concern. "You've changed since the ceremony. You used to argue, push back. Now you just accept. Because arguing wastes energy I need for hunting," Yeoman thought. "Because pushing back draws attention I cannot afford. Because the boy who would have argued didn't understand that patience is a weapon." "The ceremony clarified things," he said. "I know my place now." His mother nodded slowly. "Good. That's good." She didn't sound convinced, but she didn't press further. "You may go." Yeoman bowed and left, his mind already calculating. The accounting hall, access to clan records, monster population surveys, hunting ground allocations, patrol schedules. His mother thought she was burying him in irrelevance. She was handing him a map. That night, he pushed deeper into the marshlands than ever before. Jean's blood sense pulsed steadily, painting the darkness with information. Small signatures clustered near the shallows. Frogs, insects, nothing worth pursuing. But further in, where the water grew dark and the reeds stood taller than a man, something larger waited. Yeoman felt it before he saw it. A strong pulse, 4 times the intensity of anything he had hunted before. His breath caught. The lesser mud serpent emerged from the water like a nightmare given form. 3 meters of scaled muscle, its body, as thick as his thigh, its eyes reflecting moonlight with predatory patience. Irank, his first target above the bottom tier. Hungry, Jean projected. Eagerness bled through their bond. Dangerous, Yeoman corrected. But he didn't retreat. He had prepared for this. The bestiary notes burned in his memory. Ambush predator, moderate speed, vulnerable beneath the jaw. The serpent would strike fast, but would commit fully to each attack. That commitment was a weakness. Yeoman picked up a stone. The throw was deliberately poor. It landed 3 meters to the serpent's left, splashing in the dark water. The creature's head snapped toward the sound. Instinct, reaction, opportunity. Jin moved. The mosquito was faster now, boosted by weeks of accumulated agility. It crossed the distance in a heartbeat, landing on the soft scales beneath the serpent's jaw where the armor grew thin. The proboscis pierced. The serpent went berserk. It thrashed, coiling, snapping at the air where it thought its attacker must be. Water exploded in all directions. Yeoman dove behind a rotting log. As the tail whipped past his head, he felt the wind of its passage, close enough to kill. "Hold on," he projected desperately. Holding, the serpent rolled, trying to crush whatever bit it against the marsh bottom. Jean detached a split second before impact, rose, dove again. Another bite. More essence flowing. 3 times this pattern repeated. 3 times Yeoman's heart stopped. As Jean barely escaped death. The serpent grew sluggish, its movements losing their deadly precision. Its stats were draining in real time, feeding into the mosquito that harried it like a demon. On the fourth bite, the creature collapsed. Its body hit the water with a splash that echoed through the silent marsh. And then it was still, not dead. Yeoman could see its sides still heaving, but emptied, drained. The notification seared through his mind like lightning. +7 agility, +5 strength, +8 vitality, +3 perception, 23 points. From a single target. For times what a full night of hunting lesser creatures would yield. Yeoman's hand shook as he crouched in the marsh, water soaking through his clothes, his heart hammering against his ribs. Not from fear. Not anymore. E-rank creatures yielded 4 times what F-rank did. What would D-rank yield? C-rank? B-rank? What would a dragon yield? The question no longer felt like fantasy. It felt like mathematics. It felt like destiny. He needed to hunt bigger prey. The teacup slipped from the servant's tray at precisely the wrong moment. Yeoman's hand moved before his mind could intervene. One instant, the porcelain was tumbling through morning light. The next, it rested in his palm, not a drop of tea disturbed. The motion had been fluid, effortless. The motion of someone whose agility stat had climbed past 40 in the span of 7 days. The servant stared. Yeoman's mother paused mid-bite. Even the hall itself seemed to hold its breath. Clumsy, Yeoman muttered, deliberately fumbling the cup. As he set it down, he knocked his elbow against the table for good measure, sending chopsticks clattering. Startled me. His mother's gaze lingered a moment longer than comfortable before returning to her rice. Across the table, Yojin didn't look up from his correspondence at all. Letters from Iron Talon Academy, judging by the Crimson Seal, final preparations for his departure in 3 days. The Golden Sun had more important concerns than his brother's breakfast mishaps. Yeoman exhaled slowly and picked up his own chopsticks. The wood groaned under his grip. Hairline cracks spiderwebbed from his fingertips. He set them down immediately, appetite forgotten. This was becoming a problem. The news reached the main hall before midday. A thornback boar had been spotted in the northern hunting grounds. Donc, valuable core. 2 retainers already dead, their bodies found with chest cavities caved in by tusks thick as a man's arm. Yeoman listened from his usual position near the back of the gathering, invisible among the junior servants and distant cousins who made up the Crimson Fong's diminished numbers. His father's voice carried easily through the chamber, heavy with the particular exhaustion of a clan head watching his domain shrink year by year. We cannot let this creature range freely. The hunting grounds are our primary source of I'll handle it. Yojin stepped forward, and the room's attention shifted like iron filings to a magnet. Wariong coiled around his shoulders, scales catching lamplight, smoke curling from nostrils the color of molten gold. An ember dragon, a rank, bonded its selection to the Crimson Fong's brightest hope. The beast's heat rippled the air around Yojin's head like a living crown. A departure gift, Yojin continued, and his smile held the easy confidence of someone who had never doubted the outcome of anything. I'll bring you its core before sundown. Cheers. Applause. Pride swelling in his father's weathered face. Yeoman raised his hand. The room didn't exactly fall silent. He wasn't important enough for silence. But a few heads turned. His mother's eyes widened slightly. His father's brow furrowed in confusion, as if trying to remember which son this was. I could carry supplies, Yeoman said quietly. For the hunting party. Yojin glanced back, and for a moment their eyes met. Something flickered in the elder brother's expression. Not hostility, not even contempt, but something worse. The mild puzzlement of a man noticing a piece of furniture he'd forgotten he owned. Fine, Yojin said, already turning away. Stay out of the way. The northern forest swallowed sound like a hungry thing. Yeoman moved at the rear of the hunting party, shoulders bent under a pack deliberately overstuffed to justify his presence. 3 elder hunters ranged ahead, their bonded beasts, a pair of tracking hounds and a scarred mountain cat, weaving between ancient oaks. Yojin walked at the center like a prince surveying his domain, Wariong's tail leaving scorch marks on fallen leaves. No one spoke to Yeoman. No one looked at him. He used the anonymity well. Every fork in the path, catalogued. Every clearing wide enough for aerial escape, memorized. He watched Warion's attack patterns during the brief skirmish with a territorial wolf pack. Always the same sequence. Flame breath to disorient, wing buffet to create distance, killing strike from above. Powerful. Predictable. Yojin fought the way he lived. Overwhelming force applied without subtlety, because subtlety had never been required. Jun, Yeoman thought through their bond. Are you seeing this? A pulse of confirmation from inside his collar, where the mosquito rode hidden. Jun was always watching now, always hungry. The thornback boar's den lay in a ravine choked with deadfall. The creature burst from the shadows like a battering ram made flesh, all bristling spines and fury, tusks gouging trenches in the earth. One hunter went down immediately, leg shattered. The mountain cat screamed and fled. Chaos erupted in the confined space, fire and blood, and the stench of burning hair. It lasted perhaps 3 minutes. When the smoke cleared, the boar lay still, Warion's talons buried in its throat. Yojin stood over the kill with his chest heaving and his eyes bright with triumph. Untouched, unmarked, the very image of heroic victory. "The core," he commanded, and the surviving hunters rushed to obey. No one noticed Yeoman slip into the underbrush. The blood trail was faint, but unmistakable to his enhanced perception. Yeoman followed it through a thicket of thorn bushes, ignoring the scratches that healed almost as fast as they formed until he found what he was looking for. The lesser thornback lay curled in a hollow between roots, no larger than a hunting dog. Juvenile, the dead boar's offspring, most likely killed by a stray burst of dragon fire that had swept through the ravine. Its eyes were already glazing, but its body still held warmth. Yeoman crouched beside it, heart hammering. "Can you drain the dead?" Jun emerged from his collar and drifted down toward the corpse. The mosquito's proboscis extended delicate as a surgeon's needle and pierced the cooling flesh. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the notification seared through his mind. Essence drain, limited, deceased target, extraction rate, 30%. Stats transferred. Strength +4, vitality +6, special, thornhide, +2. Yeoman's breath caught. Special stat. He could steal unique abilities. The implications cascaded through his mind like dominoes falling. Every beast possessed a special attribute tied to its nature. The boar's thorn hide, a serpent's venom glands, a phoenix's flame core. If Jun could drain those traits from corpses, even at reduced efficiency, he didn't need to kill legendary beasts himself. He just needed access to their bodies. Distant cheering echoed through the trees. The hunting party celebrating. Yeoman straightened, wiped his hands on his trousers, and started back toward the group. He moved slowly, deliberately, letting exhaustion settle into his shoulders like a familiar coat. But as he walked, something rippled beneath his skin. He glanced down at his forearm and froze. Tiny protrusions rose along the flesh, thorny, bristled, the same texture as the boar's hide. They pushed through for just a moment, visible and undeniable, before sinking back beneath the surface like stones disappearing into still water. Yeoman pulled his sleeve down with shaking hands. He had stolen more than numbers. He had stolen potential. The drums thundered across Crimson Fong's central courtyard. As Yojin mounted the ceremonial carriage, Warion coiled magnificent and golden atop the lacquered roof. Banners snapped in the morning wind. Children pressed against their parents' legs, pointing at the dragon's ember-bright scales. Elders nodded with something between pride and desperation. Yeoman stood at the crowd's edge, applauding with the rest. His enhanced perception caught what others missed. His brother's white-knuckled grip on his sword hilt. The micro-tremor in Yojin's jaw that spoke of performance anxiety buried beneath aristocratic composure. Their father's smile, too wide, held too long, masking calculations about academy, fees the clan could barely afford. And there, 3 rows back, a woman in blue silk, azure scales, serpent crest embroidered small, but unmistakable at her collar. She wasn't watching Yojin. She was counting heads. measuring the thinness of the crowd, noting how few able-bodied tamers remained in a clan that once fielded hundreds. The Crimson Fang's weakness was no secret to their enemies. It was an invitation. The carriage rolled forward. Yojin raised one hand in farewell, and the crowd's cheering swelled. Yeoman clapped until his palms stung, until the procession disappeared beyond the eastern gate, until the last of the spectators dispersed. Then he turned and walked toward the Ashen Wilds. No one stopped him. No one called his name. His brother's departure had made him even more invisible than before, a background detail in a painting no one cared to examine. Exactly as he needed. The first expedition took 3 days of preparation. Yeoman mapped the outermost regions using stolen hunting reports from the clan archives. He identified terrain features, water sources, creature territories that overlapped, and those that stood isolated. He cached dried rations and hollowed trees at 3 separate locations, each marking a different escape route back to clan lands. Zhen's silent approach had strengthened through use. The skill that once reduced detection by 30% now rendered the Mosquito nearly invisible to anything below C-rank awareness. They moved through the dead forest's edges like smoke through fingers. The first kill was a rockclaw badger. Déronk, 63 total stat points. Zhen drained it, while it slept, and Yeoman felt the familiar warmth spread through his muscles. +4 strength, +3 vitality, +2 agility to match. The numbers climbed in his mental interface like a secret fortune. The second expedition, 2 days later. A spine-back lizard sunning itself on volcanic rock. The third, the fourth, the seventh. 12 days. 14 creatures. Every hunt refined his methodology. He learned to read territorial scratch marks. He memorized which prey animals indicated which predators nearby. He began thinking like the monsters he stalked, anticipating their fear responses, their attack patterns, their fatal moment of vulnerability. His total stats now rivaled a mid-tier E-rank tamer. His official records still listed him as Crimson Fang's garbage collector. The letter arrived on the 13th day. Yeoman read it 3 times, expression carefully blank, while his father's steward waited with obvious impatience. Iron Talon Academy's formal seal pressed deep into crimson wax. The calligraphy was elegant, impersonal. Probationary admission. Support trainee classification. His brother's required recommendation for clan unity attached. As a footnote, servant, the letter meant. You may attend, as your brother's shadow, fetching his meals and polishing his equipment. While proper students learn, his father signed the approval documents without meeting Yeoman's eyes. Be grateful, the patriarch muttered. Yojin didn't have to include you. I am grateful, father. The words tasted like copper on his tongue, but his mind was already racing ahead. Iron Talon Academy maintained training beasts for student practice. Ranked sparring matches meant wounded creatures requiring disposal. Monthly hunting expeditions penetrated territories holding B-rank prey, a rank if the students grew ambitious. Bigger prey, stronger prey. The academy wasn't punishment. It was a hunting ground wearing an institution's mask. The night before departure, Yeoman did not sleep. The Shadowfang fox had been spotted twice near the clan's northern border. C-rank, a creature that should be impossible for an F-rank beast to challenge. Yeoman spent 6 hours tracking its patrol route through moonlit underbrush. The fox moved in a figure-8 pattern between 2 hunting grounds, returning to its den beneath a collapsed shrine precisely every 4 hours. It slept in 90-minute cycles, its shadow-attuned senses dimming during deepest rest. At the third bell of night, he crouched behind a moss-covered boulder 20 feet from the den entrance. Now, Zhen descended from the canopy like a crimson whisper. The mosquito landed on the fox's haunch, proboscis piercing dense fur to find the artery beneath. Essence drain activated. Stat energy began flowing, a river of stolen potential coursing through the bond. The fox's eyes snapped open. It screamed, a sound between a bark and a human shriek, and twisted violently. Zhen detached, dodged, circled. The fox lunged toward movement it could barely perceive, shadows rippling around its form like living armor. One claw caught Yeoman across the shoulder. Pain exploded white-hot through his awareness. He felt flesh part, felt blood soak immediately through his tunic, felt his grip on consciousness waver. He held position. Again, he commanded through the bond. "Don't stop." Jun struck. The fox snapped at empty air. Jun retreated, circled, struck again. 3 drains. 5. 7. The Shadowfang fox's movement slowed. Its shadow cloak flickered, destabilized, collapsed entirely. It staggered sideways, legs buckling. Jun landed on its throat and did not release. The creature died without another sound. Yeoman's interface erupted with notifications. +6 strength, +4 agility, +5 vitality, +3 spirit, +2 perception, +3 special. Shadow Step acquired at 15% efficiency, 23 points. From a single creature. He had crossed a threshold. Dawn found him bandaging his shoulder with strips torn from his spare tunic. The wound was deep, but clean. It would scar, but it would heal. A small price. A necessary lesson. Jun returned to his palm. Yeoman froze. The mosquito had grown. No longer thumbnail-sized, it now spanned 2 full fingers, its crimson coloring deeper than before, almost luminescent in the early light. Its wings carried a faint iridescence that hadn't existed yesterday. Its compound eyes seemed sharper, more aware, holding an intelligence that exceeded any insect's right. A prompt pulsed in his vision. Evolution conditions. 40% met. Yeoman stared at the notification. At the creature resting on his palm. At the blood drying beneath his sleeve. The carriage to Iron Talon Academy was waiting. He boarded with his wound hidden and his questions burning. What happens when a trash beast stops being trash? The journey took 4 days through mountain passes and checkpoint towns. Yeoman sat in the servant's compartment at the carriage's rear, watching countryside blur past smudged windows. His shoulder throbbed with each jostle. Jun hid inside his collar, drowsing. On the 3rd night, they stopped at a way station for supplies. Yeoman stretched his legs in the courtyard, breathing mountain air, and felt Jun suddenly go rigid against his throat. The mosquito's new ability activated without prompting. Blood sense, a skill Yeoman hadn't fully tested. Information flooded his awareness. Creature locations. Stat totals. A map of living energy painted across his mind's eye. The way station's stable hands. 12 combined stats. 15-9. The merchant in the corner. 23. And then, Yeoman's blood turned to ice. A figure emerged from the way station's private quarters. Blue silk robes. Serpent crest at her collar. Pale skin and blue-black hair framing eyes the color of deep water. Chong Suin, the azure scale heir. His blood sense screamed the reading before he could look away. S-rank sapphire serpent. 2,847 total stats, and coiled behind her. The serpent's massive head swiveled toward him, toward the tiny creature hidden at his throat. Its tongue flickered. Its pupils contracted, and it hissed.